Okay, it is 6:30, so I'm going to call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, August 26th, 2024, and we are at the OSD Innovation Center in Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Here. Dr. Bush? Ms. Garrison? Dr. Lakuta? Mr. Pankratz? Here. Ms. Wright? Here. Ms. Flanagan?
Here, board does have a quorum, just barely. We have a couple of board members out of town, so thank you all for being here. Okay, we do have proof of notice, so this meeting has been duly noted, so we are good there. We have a pretty short agenda tonight, no action items. We do have a visit from our German exchange, who I'll call up in a little bit. And then we do have the Learning and Student Achievement Goals update tonight. So that is the extent of our agenda. So I will look for a motion to approve that agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right, moving on to consent calendar. I will read the following donation. We have a $140.99 donation from Oregon Choral Boosters for the choral music for the choir program. And so that is really the extent of my updates on the consent calendar. So I will entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the consent calendar? All right, hearing none, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to information items. First is public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Is anyone registered? Okay, one more time. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, moving on. Next is OEA report. Is anyone here from the OEA? Okay, we will move on. And then student report. Since we have not started school yet, we will move to that once school has started. So we'll welcome students later on. So number 4 is our informational update on the summer of 2024 German exchange. So guys, come on up. And you can turn on the microphone and then the floor is yours.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
Perfect. My name is Julie Mushensky. I'm a crier. I'll say that right away. I am the OHS German teacher and coordinator of the OHS short-term exchange with the Dreieich-Schule in Langen, Germany. The students with me here tonight are a small representation of the 24 who participated in the host family-based, almost 4-week journey that took us to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland this past summer. As you can imagine, these students are changed forever because of this experience, and without the school board's approval, this exchange would not take place. We are here tonight to express our gratitude for your support, and I think it best that the students themselves tell you in their own words how the exchange impacted them in a positive way.
All right, I'll start us off. My name's Hans Kiesaw. I'm going into my senior year of high school. I went on the German exchange in the fall, and I hosted a German exchange student in TIO in October. Thank you to the board for granting us this opportunity to go overseas and experience these things that we never would have experienced in the classroom. I just want to take this time to say that I've made so many more friendships than I ever would have had throughout this exchange. Whether it be in my group or with Germans, I strengthened and formed bonds between people that I never would have met outside of the exchange. I still Snapchat with many of the Germans every day, and we were trying to get them to come next summer, and a couple of us to go over there. it's just one big ball of fun, and I hope it never stops rolling down the hill that divides the USA and Germany. So, thank you. Here you go.
First of all, I would like to thank the board for allowing us to go on this amazing trip. Personally, I experienced that I was able to further my understanding of German while I was there, and really being able to like understand German more just being in that environment. I think that was one thing that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have otherwise, and I think it greatly improved my understanding and ability to speak in German. Second of all, I made incredible friendships along the way. Me and my German Philip are super close friends. We still send videos of us talking about our days and like what's going on in our lives daily, and it's just like an incredible opportunity, or like an incredible thing that to see, because I get to learn about how our lives are different, being so far away from each other but still being such close friends. In the future, I think this will impact me, because I will be looking forward, or I'll be looking for other opportunities in college to be able to study abroad and kind of have that experience again. So, yeah.
What's your name?
I'm Zachary Bijak. Yes.
I'm Sophia Dyer, and first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the school board for all of your support so that we could go on this amazing trip. I think this exchange has made me a much more confident and independent person, because traveling in a foreign country developed my social skills and allowed me to be more comfortable around my host Sophie and her family. During the trip, I experienced the difference in school and family schedules that they have in Germany. It was unusual for me to finish school at 1 p.m. and then have the rest of the day free. Also, the ice cream in Germany is to die for. I had never been outside of the country before this exchange, and it definitely made me realize how much I appreciate German culture and how much I enjoy traveling. I would love to go back as soon as possible to be reminded of everything new that I tried and people I met. I've wanted to go to Germany since I was little, and this trip was definitely a life-changing experience for me.
Hello, my name is Leah Wyszynski. I'm going to be a junior this year, and I would also like to express my gratitude to the board for this opportunity to be able, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to travel overseas. And I think something that was really positive for me on this exchange was being able to not only appreciate another culture and learn about another culture, but also to be able to appreciate my home culture more and almost understand it better, seeing it through a different lens. And like Sophia said, also the ice cream over there is to die for. So that's a plus. And also, I was able to learn a lot about German culture and just the ways that, you know, our minds work differently across overseas. It is different, and it's interesting to see how we have similarities and also differences in the way we function in our daily lifestyle and how much that affects it. I definitely grew on this experience because it is a challenge going to a new country, especially when you're with a new family that I had not met before, because I stayed with a different family than the person I hosted, and so I hadn't met any of them before, and so it was definitely an adjustment. But once I got adjusted, it was a really fun time, and I'm really glad I participated. It was once in a lifetime experience, and I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat.
Hello, everyone. I'm Olivia Olsen. I'm a junior this year, and I went on the German exchange. I would like to start by thanking you board members, because without your support for the German program and the German exchange, this wouldn't have been possible, and I truly think it was an amazing experience. Being able to travel out of the country, we went to German schools, and although it seems obvious that they're going to speak a different language, being in the classroom and actually listening to that was really cool. I remember in one of my history classes, I was actually able to understand almost all of the lesson that was going on, which was all in German. And so I think that was a really cool experience. I also think I changed a lot. I became a lot more open-minded, and I was willing to adapt to change since I was with all my classmates and not just my family on a trip. It really pushed me to be more open-minded and to adapt to different obstacles. Along with that, I also think I grew a lot. I'm a really picky eater, and I tried a lot of new foods when I was over there, and I think I went out of my comfort zone more. And I'm just really glad I went. I had a really great host family. My host sister, Melina, and we still talk every single day. I talk to all of her friends that she introduced me to. And whenever I was with her family and her friends, I never felt like they were just being forced to include me. I really felt like I was a part of their family and a part of their friend group. So thank you for the support, and I cannot wait to see the program continue to grow because it is really awesome.
Hello, my name is Erin Cranky. I'm going to be a sophomore this year. First off, I would just like to thank you, the school board, for supporting German and the Gap Exchange. Without you, the trip may not have happened. I loved learning about all the cultures and getting to see the differences between ours and theirs. Without being there, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to see our true difference. Being in a classroom, you can see differences, but being there, you can just see everything that's actually different. I feel like I grew and changed as a person. Before I left, I was very dependent on my family and my friends that are here. But being there away from my family and friends, I had to learn how to be more independent and not have to lean on everybody. And I feel like all the relationships that I had and all that just grew me as a person. I still talk to my host sister, Yulia, and her dad, too. They grew to be like a second family to me, and we still talk all the time. And she even talks about coming here again and me going over there, hopefully next summer maybe, and getting able to meet just other people that aren't the same as they are here is amazing. And without this exchange, I feel like none of this would be able to happen. So thank you again to you guys for letting that exchange happen.
Okay, I have to clarify. The reason I said I'm a crier is because these kids mean the world to me. And I wear my emotions on my sleeve. And these kids were some of the most incredible humans I could have asked for to be on this trip with me the first time. And there are not words to express just how grateful I am to have been with them on this journey. Even though there were separate friend groups and sort of kind of cliquey kind of pieces, they came together as a group. And it didn't matter, we had freshmen all the way up to senior. It didn't matter, they meshed together as a group. This group as a whole supported each other and me in times of stress. They really were an amazing group of equals. So as their educator, I would also like to thank you for continuing to support these programs for our students. Getting out into the space beyond Oregon, Wisconsin, and the United States has such a great impact on students' worldviews and perspectives, and it is the best way to apply the skills, the knowledge, and the understanding of not only a new culture, but also our own. Thank you for putting our students first. And one final note, it would be rude of me not to acknowledge and thank Dr. Bergstrom and Mr. Kleiner for offering me this opportunity and trusting me with the program coordination and the welfare of our students on this journey. It is an honor to be a member of your staff and to stand alongside you in the education of these phenomenal young people. So thank you.
Thanks for coming. That was wonderful to hear from everyone individually. So thank you guys. We appreciate you coming here. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask them? Nope. Gina, do you?
I'm wondering what food you tried that was new that you loved and something you tried that you thought, maybe I'd try that again later.
If you want to come up to the microphone so people at home can hear you.
Me, I tried Leberkäse, which translates to liver cheese, which is kind of like but when it was in Germany, it was really, 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 really good. And then I tried it here, and it wasn't as good. But I don't like mustard here, and I tried mustard there, and it was a lot better. Like I put it on a brat, and it was like, it's like really German. So I just want to share that.
I already said the ice cream was phenomenal, but I also liked all their baked goods. Like my host mom, she baked goods all the time just at home, and then we also got a lot outside at like the local bakeries, so that was really good. One thing I didn't really like was the schnitzel, surprisingly, but yeah.
I think I'm gonna refute that last point.
Second.
Yeah. I had schnitzel there. My host mom made it for me, along with a grüne Soße, which is green sauce topping or like sauce on it, and it was amazing. It's like, so schnitzel is a thin, like fried piece of pork, and then the green sauce is made out of 7 different herbs blended up, and it's kind of like the sauce is kind of tangy, kind of, and I mean, that combined with the schnitzel was just amazing, so, yeah.
For me, in general, I feel like it was really interesting to just see the total difference in diet they have there and just the culture surrounding food in general. How they eat pretty much the same thing for breakfast and dinner every day, and then lunch is actually their largest meal, unlike how dinner here is our largest meal usually. And also just everything was so much fresher there, which I really enjoyed. Like you'd have fresh vegetables, go shopping a couple times a week, and fresh bread too. We would go to the bakery early in the morning and get warm fresh bread from the bakery, which was really cool. Something I think I don't enjoy as much is probably sauerkraut. I gotta say, it's just not my thing. It's never been my thing, but I think the goods outweigh the bads. So yeah. I did.
All right, thank you guys. We appreciate you coming. Spend some time with us. Thank you. Okay, moving on to C, action items. We don't have any action items tonight, so we'll move on to D, discussion items, which is committee reports. Our committee chairs are not here this evening, so we will, but we do know when the next vision steering meeting is, which is right before the, is it right before the board meeting on the 9th? No.
No, it's that week, but later in the week.
Okay. Board members will get those dates out to you. All right, moving on to E, information items. So we have vision and strategic planning, which is Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So I really am going to move quickly through this today, although I have to say all that you see on this planning diagram, we're doing a lot of talking about each of these items because our new educators were here with us last week. All of our educators are here this week, and all of our conversations with one another, all of our professional learning, starts with the mission and the values in the Portrait of a Graduate. So this is something that we are all going through continuously and will again several times this week. In addition to board priorities, these are something that we will be talking about repeatedly. And I think it helps us all understand how focused we are from the board to the classroom. Another example is with our goals. But what we're really excited to all hear about tonight is the teaching and learning update, because we have our Learning and Student Achievement Department and our Special Education Department all coming up together to talk about the results of 2023 and what we're looking forward to and what goals we've set for 24-25.
I'm going to take this out because it's a little easier to pass around because we're going to try to rotate around and take different parts. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about where we've come from and where we're going with learning and student achievement. I have with me Ms. Jarstad and Dr. Widensee, and so we're going to be co-presenting and giving you some information. I know that we shared a spreadsheet with you last week, and some of you were able to look at it and ask really good questions, so thank you for that. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Leslie. And anybody else, I'm sure there will be more questions after this, and we're happy to talk through them with you. As Dr. Bergstrom mentioned, the thing that we do a lot is start off with why we're here and what we value. And this was, as she said, oft repeated last week with our new educators. So, we start with our values, and everything is grounded in that. And so as we're looking at the whole child and educational equity, this is an important part toward that, and you'll hear some of those themes reflected later on. The portrait of a graduate is also one of the things that we really focus on. And tonight we're going to be focusing mostly on the competency part, because that's kind of what we work with. And in future sessions, you'll be hearing from other members of the district administrative team about some of the other aspects, because we know that competency is not the only thing, but it's our area of focus today. And finally, we have our mission, helping students acquire the skills, knowledge, and attitudes needed to achieve their individual potential. Again, we know that that's holistic, but we're focusing on one important component of it tonight, the educational academic portion. So I am going to pass this off as we give you a little bit of information about the background of where we came from, after I tell you about the kind of why we started looking at this. So this is the data from the 22-23 school year. So not the one that just ended, but we're setting the stage for why we're looking at this. These were our STAR literacy state level benchmarks. And we looked at this, and now the thing you have to remember with this chart is that it's upside down from what you would normally think of. And this is the way it's generated from the state's data portal. And so if we changed it every time, we're just leaving it because that would be too hard. But what you'll notice is that at the bottom, the key, it has advanced is sort of the light blue, which is that 10.4%. Proficient is the dark blue, which is about 41%. Basic is 35%, which is the yellow. And then below basic is the orange part. So to summarize this, it means that we had about 52% of our students who were proficient or above, and about 48% who were below. So having nearly half of our students being not proficient in literacy was concerning, very concerning, because literacy is really essential for all the learning that happens after that. So when we looked at this, we noticed also that in spite of years of efforts before this, our data hadn't changed that much. And that was even true with some populations that had traditionally been underserved, that I remember in past years we've been like, we really need to reach these specific groups that just haven't had the opportunities. And yet it didn't change. And so when we looked at that, we said, okay, we need to really do something a little bit different. And so we embarked on a project to focus our efforts and use them more specifically with 100-day goal cycles with SAIL.
Okay, so we didn't just pick SAIL out of thin air. We networked with our colleagues from different districts, and oftentimes we heard from those colleagues that the SAIL process was a process that really worked for them to help make changes at a systems level. So SAIL is an acronym. It stands for School Administrators Institute for Transformational Leadership. It's from ASA, and I think it's really interesting that the T is not accounted for, because it's one of the most important parts of the process. So our purpose, our collective purpose in going to SAIL was we really wanted to figure out a way to support the student achievement goal, our goal being that every student will demonstrate proficiency of grade level literacy standards and a minimum of 1 year's growth. Now, when we got to SAIL, this was a quote that they started with. So this would have been not last summer, but the summer before that. We went to SAIL for our first year. And one of the quotes that we were grounded in was, schools know how to change. They know how to change promiscuously and at the drop of a hat. What schools do not know how to do is improve, engage in sustained and continuous progress toward a performance goal over time. So, grounded in this, we realized as an administrative team that we needed to take our time to focus on a few things really well and commit to them the time it takes to see the results. With that being said, our first year of the sale process looked a little bit like this. So during the 3 days that we spend with ASA, we take time to really drill into the data and come up with processes and like hypotheses for why things are happening. But ultimately, we come up with our goal, which I shared earlier from the year was the 1 year growth or proficiency. And we break it down into 3 separate cycles, 3 100-day cycles. So this ensures continuous improvement and alignment with our strategic goals. We never take them off the table. Each 100-day cycle has a specific focus that builds on the previous one, creating a cohesive plan for the entire year. So for example, if you take a look at cycle 1 from last year, which was June through November, we were focusing on training on the instructional core and PLCs. So what we did was the administrative team underwent retraining on the PLC Plus protocols through the book that we grounded our PLC work in. And then we collaboratively created a slide deck that would be shared at each of the schools. This ensured that each of the schools got consistency and that their understanding and application was consistent across the district. You'll see the result is basically a compliance that happened. That was our goal, and that happened in the first 100 days. In the second 100 days, we started focusing on involving specialists in our PLC meetings. So our goal really was to have our specialists, like instructional coaches or special education teachers, join at least one PLC meeting. Now, this was achieved. However, during the process, we learned that while it would be beneficial to increase the frequency of the specialist at the PLCs, it's logistically challenging due to the scheduling constraints and the existing responsibilities. Our third cycle, which was March through June, we focused on the implementation of analyzing student work protocol, which is a specific protocol within the PLC Plus framework. This was successfully achieved with teams engaging in deeper discussions about student outcomes and instructional strategies based on analyzed work. So each cycle's focus, as I said before, really reflects our commitment to continuous improvement and refining our practices in order to better support student achievement. It's important to note that in our first year of SAIL, our 100-day approach, the primary focus was on ensuring compliance. The foundation was necessary to establish a consistent structure and that is understood across the district, which allows us to move beyond compliance toward meaningful and impactful practices in our current year.
So that's what we did in basically the 22-23, and then so what we did for this year, we wanted to we worked on those throughout the year, those 100-day cycles, and so now I want to share kind of where we ended up with that. The first thing I'll say is we are giving a broad overview tonight, and each school will present their own story later. I'm going to start with the high school and take a look at that. And I'm going to start from a really high level. So one of the things that the high school measures is ACT scores. And so this is the average composite score over the past 5 years. We're happy to say that this is the highest score that we've had in 5 years. You'll see before the pandemic, our average composite was a 22.5. We took a hit after the pandemic, and we've been slowly moving up since then. So this last year it was 22.7. And the trend line, which you can maybe barely see as that blue line there, is actually sloping up. So we are looking at that and hoping to continue that. And we have plans to do so. I shouldn't say hope, because the idea is that we have a plan and we're executing it to make that happen. I'm going to talk about one aspect of the high school, because the high school does things a bit differently. They have a Redefining Ready framework that they're using, which you've heard Jim talk about, and it is a composite of many different measurements that are research-based that ensure that students all through their progression of high school with certain criteria for each grade are going to be ready at the end of high school, as our Portrait of a Graduate says, to be ready for college and or career. Some will do one or the other, some will do both at the same time. And Jim's going to go into a lot of the details of that because tonight we're focusing on our SAIL goal, which is specifically about literacy and reading. I'm only going to share the ACT scores that relate to reading and literacy and writing. And that's not to dismiss the rest of them. That's just kind of to maintain some focus for tonight because that was the SAIL goal. And the high school obviously has more, and this is one of the components out of many that are there. So I just want to be clear that we're not ignoring the others, and Jim can tell you way more about that. So ACT, the organization, actually has metrics for readiness for college success. And so within that like language composite score, they have subscales. And so these are the subscales for the percent of our students who are meeting the reading readiness marks according to ACT. As you probably remember, all juniors, 11th graders in the state are required to take the ACT as the state's assessment. So these, I'm going to read them to you because they're pretty tiny on the thing here. So the first thing is the percent of students who met readiness in the area of reading, and the subcomponent is key ideas and details. So being able to read and identify, pull out the key ideas and details from that, and 60% of the students who took it were college ready in that area. The next graph is the percent of who met readiness for reading in craft and structure. That is 62%. The next one is reading integration of knowledge and ideas, and that one is at 58%. It continues. These are specifically on just sort of like English in general. And so the percent of students college ready for, I'm looking at two things. I forgot these aren't linked. Percent of readiness for production of writing is 75%. That's our highest score. And the percent meeting for knowledge of language is 68%. And then finally, the conventions of standard English, kind of the grammar, syntax, structure types, is at 66%. So these are all the subcomponents within that are the readiness components that are used as part of the whole Redefining Ready. And Leslie,
Sorry, I just wanted to verify. Are these last two slides, these are single year scores or the composite for the past 5?
These are single year scores.
Okay, thank
so
you.
these, thanks for that clarification. So this is the graduating class of 2025 because they took it as juniors last spring. Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Candace to talk about what happened in K-8 as a result of our SAIL efforts for the past year.
So as you can see on this chart, we have our STAR literacy report, and we were able to increase our proficiency overall by 4%, which we think is pretty exciting. What is a little bit less exciting is that on this slide you can see that our proficiency growth was not across the board. It wasn't even across the board. So I'm not going to talk about all of the subgroups because there's some pretty small numbers in those stats. But what we know then is that if not everybody achieves that 4%, even if they all achieved at 4%, we're not closing that gap. So we need to focus on a couple of groups and increase their achievement by more than what the general population will increase in order to start closing that gap. So particularly we have our students with IEPs and our multilingual learners that need to have a little increase in proficiency.
Just a little aside that there are contributors other than SAIL that we feel really contributed to the success of our K-8 4% growth last year. So last year, you'll remember that we implemented a new K-5 literacy curriculum that's aligned with the science of reading. It was carefully selected to provide our students with a strong foundation in reading, writing, and critical thinking skills. The curriculum emphasizes evidence-based practices, ensuring that our instruction is grounded in research and in best practices. Feedback from teachers and the initial student assessments indicate that the curriculum is making a positive impact on student learning. The structured approach helps ensure consistency across classrooms, making it easier to track progress and identify areas of need. Both Letters and Aspire are professional development programs that deepen teachers' understanding of the science behind reading instruction. Letters is geared more towards primary grades and Aspire more towards upper elementary to middle school. Each of these equip teachers with the knowledge and skills to effectively teach literacy to all students, including those who struggle. By investing in Letters and Aspire, we're not just enhancing the current instructional practice, but we're building a foundation that will benefit students for years to come. Teachers are becoming literacy experts who can diagnose reading difficulties and implement the targeted interventions needed to overcome them. Still me. All right. So now we're going to move into this year at SAIL as we have begun to kind of fine tune our process and remain focused. One of the quotes that we had at SAIL this year is, "Priorities are like arms. If you think you have more than a couple, you're either lying or crazy." So taking that into account, we identified 2 very specific goals this year through SAIL. Student Learning Goal 1 is we will increase the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency of state level standards in reading by at least 5% each year for the next 3 years. And Student Goal number 2 is for students from underserved demographic groups, we will increase the percentage of students demonstrating proficiency by 7%. Now, we understand that Goal 1 is ambitious, but it's also necessary. It sets a clear target for improvement of reading proficiency, which is a critical area for student success across all grade levels. The 5% annual increase is measurable and an achievable target, especially given the 4% that we saw this in the year prior. It also ensures that we're continuously working towards higher academic standards and not just comfortable maintaining the status quo. So to achieve this, we are continuing to leverage our K-5 literacy curriculum along with targeted interventions and ongoing professional development for our teachers. Regular assessment and using student work analysis in PLCs will play a key role in monitoring progress and making the necessary adjustments to instruction. Student Learning Goal 2 is critical for addressing educational inequities and ensuring that all students, regardless of their background, have the opportunity to succeed. The 7% target reflects the additional support and focus needed to close the achievement gaps that exist between underserved students and their peers.
So as we were at SAIL, we were looking at what are the root causes of why we're not achieving where we want to be. And just a reminder that we consider everybody in the district, educators, and so we're not trying to place blame on anybody or provide any particular kudos to anybody, right? We're all in this together. So we identified some root causes, not that these things aren't happening regularly, but we want to address them and ensure that they're done more consistently. So our first root cause was educators are not consistently analyzing student work in PLCs to improve their instruction, which results in greater effectiveness. And the second root cause is educators are not consistently planning proactively to include accommodations and modifications in their daily instruction and interactions to allow all students to achieve grade level standards. So it's not that we're not seeing positive steps. We just really want to focus on these 2 areas as, small incremental steps so that we're consistently addressing the root causes for both of them. So in SAIL, we were looking at the most simple steps, right? So based on our root cause analysis, we hypothesized that if we continue to grow our capacity and lean into PLC research-based data protocols, specifically analyzing student work as a starting point, that as educators we will implement more responsive instruction, which should correlate to increased skill growth and achievement. So we're going to really take a look at the data that we have in our PLCs and proactively plan how to address the student needs that we have. And for Goal 2, we're again looking at that underserved demographic groups, and we are leaning into Hattie's work. I think you've heard people talk about highly effective practices previously. It's a pretty broad term, so we're specifically focusing here on instructional strategies, instructional clarity, to narrow our focus so that we're looking at learning targets, success criteria, and then subsequent checks for understanding to increase instructional clarity and reflect the high expectations and rigor of grade level standards for each and every student in our OSD classrooms. So our SAIL goals this year, our 100-day SAIL goals, are that increase in intentionality for our work. So in our first 100 days from June to November, we're expecting to have 50% of our teachers hosting a walkthrough with our walkthrough tool, which we then will be able to see those instructional targets and the checks and the success criteria in practice in the classrooms. So 50% of our teachers will host those walkthroughs in the first 100 days. Also in the first 100 days, we'll have 80% of our PLCs indicating that lessons were modified or based on the analysis of student work. I think you've heard Leslie say in the past too that we often would have the planning time, the PLC time, but not necessarily getting to that analysis of student work in terms of who's benefiting and who's not. So we really want to have that happening this year, and 80% of that, so that we're planning proactively to include the accommodations and modifications in daily instruction to allow the students to achieve the grade level standards. Some of the things that are happening this year to advance that learning is that we're having the instructional coaches be more aligned with the SAIL targeted goals. So we're freeing up some time for the coaching cycles to really focus on those targeted goals. We're implementing the 6-8 ELA curriculum, which will be aligned with the science of reading, and we're aligning K-5 science and social studies curriculum, and we're going to be operating our PLCs with more fidelity.
So that is our plan for this next year. And what I want to do now is describe to you some challenges that are mostly like technical challenges with analyzing the data from year to year, because there are some unique ones this year. And the reason I'm doing...
John, before you go on, do you mind, why don't we stop and see if anyone has any questions from the first part? Is that okay with you before we kind of move into this part?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go around the horn and see who has a couple questions. Go ahead, Leslie, if you want to start.
On the year-over-year average for the ACT, do we happen to know what other districts' averages look like?
Yeah, we have that yes, we have that somewhere. I don't have that right now, but
I'd be interested to see like
yep.
where we sit, like at least like Dane County kind of thing.
Not for this year.
No, not yet.
No,
but for
just no overall, like as in the general, like we were showing that slight
So you're talking about
upturn.
comparables from previous years as well as other districts?
Yes, just so that we could see kind of where we're at in Oregon compared to say Middleton or Sun Prairie or anything like that. So
yeah, we have that for prior years, and when that's released publicly, we can add that in for this year as well, but I can send that to you for past
that'd be
years.
great. Yeah. And then the only other question I had for SAIL goal number 2, I'm assuming it wasn't exactly said in there, but I'm assuming that is reading proficiency as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Caleb, anything?
Not entirely, but I would just highlight that I was looking at the spreadsheets that were provided to us a couple weeks ago, and this is not quite what you were asking for, but the last page of the spreadsheet has the ACT scores for all of Wisconsin for spring ACT scores across the different measures. It's not quite what you're asking for, but there is some of that data there. The only other question, and this is kind of I don't know, this is not an incredibly important question, but the improvement over time in the ACT for the high schools, and I know that it's not exactly, it's hard to like look at it as growth because it's different students every year, but is that uptick, the slight uptick in scores that you can see on that kind of that regression line, I guess, do we know, would that be statistically significant? Or do we have enough sense of the data to say if it's statistically significant?
Yes, I would say it is, in that when we look at movement on that, it's really difficult to move up like a point. And so when we look at the data over time, even those small components of points are difficult to do. I don't know the exact statistical significance of that. However, I know we have in the past couple years put more effort into preparing students for, we do additional, or we give them additional practice, and we analyze some of the content areas that students struggle in with a test that happens in the fall called the Horizon. It's a practice test, but we can get item analysis of how students did, and then we can customize teaching to it. And it's not teaching necessarily to the test, it's looking at the concepts that are kind of doing that as well. Like there's something that is a common area in math or ELA or science or whatever. And so that's an area that we've looked at, and I would say that based on what the people who always market things to us say, we can increase your scores by like up to 1 point. I would say it's a significant portion in that. That seems to be a pretty decent threshold. That's not a statistically accurate answer, but that's a general sense of what it seems to be out there.
Anna?
I have a question about the walkthrough tool. Can you help me? I know that's maybe a dance floor question, but I'm just curious what that means or what that looks like or what that, how that helps get to the root cause of one of those.
So one of the things that we did when we identified the teacher clarity, the instructional clarity that was expected, is we developed what's called an adult learning framework. And the adult learning framework goes from, I believe, beginning to fluent. And it's sort of like a rubric for the adults to know, like, so if my instructional clarity is beginning, it would look like this in the classroom. If it's developing, it would look like this. So we created this adult learning framework, and then we put that into a walkthrough tool. So what we're doing is we're trying to measure not just compliance, but also the fidelity of which teacher instructional clarity is being seen or observed in classrooms. So in non-evaluative walkthroughs, administrative staff along with teaching staff will walk through classrooms for short amounts of time to just try to gather evidence of visible teacher instructional clarity. So then what we did this last year with the ELA implementation. So we were looking for really specific things. Then we gather all the data at the end of the walkthroughs, and we share it with the leadership teams at the schools so that leadership teams can make instructional decisions for professional development for their staff based on what the data is telling us. Additionally, as a district, we get to make bigger decisions based on what the data tells us for the whole district. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Good.
Troy.
Yeah, so my question kind of revolves around what you've presented as some of the changes that have happened over the past year that have contributed mainly to mainly regarding the new K-5 ELA curriculum. And I know that the greatest contributor to student success is the teacher, and so I don't want to take anything away from the teachers, but I also know that the curriculum, you're telling us that the curriculum had a positive impact, which the data are definitely supporting that as well. I mean, some profound increases in proficiency at our K-5 level. But I guess my question revolves around what would you expect to see in year 2 of the curriculum, and how do you see the new curriculum kind of building? And I mean, do you see momentum building, and maybe tying that into the letters training as well? Like what do you see happening in year 2 as teachers get more experienced with this different curriculum?
It's a really great question, and I was working on this just before we got here. So of course, we can't take away the teacher being the #1 impact, which is why we invested so much time, money, and effort into making sure that we were maximizing the capacity of our teachers through letters training and Aspire training. We wanted to make sure that they had a very, very deep and solid understanding about the science of reading so that when they were making their instructional move choices, they had the most data to support it, right? So what I envision, like one of the things that is sort of exciting to us and to me is that typical implementation dips that we see when people are implementing new curriculum didn't necessarily show up in our data for ELA. And what we think, the reason that we think that is because before we implemented the curriculum, we maximized capacity so that we could minimize that dip. And I think we really see that. And so what do I see happening, or what do I anticipate will happen, is as the students become more familiar with the predictability of the protocols and routines, their success will also be significantly impacted in a positive way, because we'll get to take out some of that. You know, we hear people say slow down to go fast, and that's teaching those routines and teaching all of those things. And as students have gone through this curriculum, they won't need to be explicitly taught with such as in depth each year that they've received it, even the curriculum even more. So what I'm anticipating really is our 5th graders going into 6th grade are probably going to pick up that curriculum quicker than our 5th graders in 5th grade did, because there's going to be some familiarity with the curriculum. So I would anticipate our achievement scores continuing to rise.
Mm-hmm. And then on letters training, where are we at with teachers being trained in that? Have all of our teachers gone through that training, or where are we at?
So by the end of last year, not including new teachers, we were like 93% trained. And we also, when we began letters, we were really intentional about creating a sustainability plan so that this letters learning wasn't something that was only owned by, the intellectual property wasn't only by the teachers who were in our district that year. So we trained trainers, and we have 4 certified letter trainers in the district. And this summer, we have begun another cohort that has gotten all of our specialists, K-3, and our teachers who maybe didn't take it last year. We have not included our first year new teachers in this cohort. We'll get them started next year. So we're really, really high amounts of trained teachers, which really, I cannot stress enough how much that just models the commitment of our teachers to do what's best for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask if that's special ed. And then a follow-up to that, is that unusual for a district to have that much letters training in their staff, or are we seeing more and more of that?
This is a discussion for another day. It is actually where we are right now. When I speak with other people, we are really sort of leading other districts in the state with our number of teachers and the amount of people who are trained in the science of reading. But I'll foreshadow at a later date, Kim White and I will come in and talk a little bit about Act 20 and some of the compliance measures that go along with Act 20. But when we talk about that, the important thing to remember is it's really the commitment of our staff that is like making sure our kids have the best experience.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's really, really exciting to see that come through in the data, that success. So great work.
I want to add one other thing to that, which is that it's not so much the number of staff that were trained, but the way that they were trained and the timeline of it, which I give great kudos to Darcy and to Kim White for leading that kind of ahead of the curve, because having gone to several events with teachers from other districts this last summer, not all are thrilled about the sort of like, oh, you have to do this now that the state says so, where it's great stuff. But I think what we have, the success that we've had is largely due to the planning that Darcy's done to like motivate people to get the training before it was like Act 20. Because they are able to see the benefits from it and able to understand the differences first. So that being ahead of the curve and not having to do it sort of under the gun as a compliance measure was huge. So good job.
So my question, it's really exciting for me to see all the work that you've done, and especially setting the goals in terms of the 5% and the 7%, and then even further to that is the root cause 1 and 2. I think a strength that we've had as a district in terms of our values or our portrait of a graduate is those have been so socialized that they're a fabric of the being of our teachers. So my question is, how have you socialized the 5%, 7% goals or the root causes? So if I would go to a teacher who's at RCI and I would say, tell me what your goals are for learning reading proficiency, or what are the root causes, would they be able to tell me?
Yeah, I think they would. You know, part of the socialization of it is, and obviously these goals have not been around as long as the Apple graphic and everything, but they've been a continuous point of emphasis that have been grounding things. One big component to that is the 100-day cycles that we have to keep coming back to and keep focusing on the goals and make iterative improvements based on the results of what we did in the last 100 days. And a lot of us kind of at the district office sort of adopted a school. And so like I went to Brooklyn's leadership meetings 2 summers ago, and sometimes during the year, you know, when I could. But it was great to be part of showing to the leadership team, here is what, as a district office team, we did at SAIL. And then for this past summer, all the school leadership teams were here in this room, absorbing and carrying on and developing next steps that they will go back and share with their staff, which has already started to happen this week. Actually, next few days, a lot of people are going to hear about it if they haven't already. So it really is that continuous focus on it and the touchstones of, hey, we're doing this and we're looking at a goal that we're going to try to, a short-term goal in November to reach our long-term goal of the 5% at the end of the year. So I think it's, the intentionality is causing that. I can't say for sure, especially after a summer, how many you could go up to and say, have you heard this? But anybody on a school leadership team definitely would be able to tell you right off the bat.
Yeah, that was a pretty extreme example, but got to what that you're really socializing this and making sure that, which is, where we were kind of a year ago and saying, okay, our individual educators seeing these data points and understanding these numbers and understanding the why of what you're asking them to do and what we're looking for. So that's great. Any other questions on this section before they move on? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for doing that before I get into the next section, because it is good to have those questions answered before I get into data challenges. So there are a few challenges with tracking our data, and the reason I'm telling you these is because if you don't see these ahead of time, I'm trying to set the stage for the elementary principals, because when they come up and they say, oh, here's my data from last year and here's my data from this year, the first instinct is a little bit of a, ooh, what happened there? And I'm trying to explain what happened there. So there are 4 main challenges that are happening right now, and 2 of these are ones that we've made choices in Oregon to change the way we're doing things for some really good reasons. And 2 of them were done by DPI. And so we're going to, Darcy and I are going to kind of take turns explaining these. But the 4 challenges that make it difficult to compare from 23-24 and prior to 24-25 and thereafter are these. 1, Oregon, we decided to switch from risk level benchmarks to state proficiency benchmarks. I'm going to explain what that means. The second one is that we stopped using some data points that were not supported by science of reading. And Darcy will explain more about that because she already mentioned science of reading. The third one is that DPI, they call it range finding, but they determined new cut scores because the standards changed. So when new standards get adopted, they change the forward exam because you want the assessment to match the standards that it's supposed to be measuring. And then after that, they say, okay, now we have a new assessment. We need to do new range finding to find out what counts as proficient or advanced. And STAR hasn't quite caught up with that yet. So they're gonna, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the last one, which is kind of minor, but DPI changed actually the performance category names. And so I've had to catch myself. Oh yeah, geez, you take that. I'm slacking. So the names are different, which is minor. So the main thing, or the first challenge here, is that we decided to move from a risk level to a proficiency level. On the left is, and this is we're talking about STAR, the assessment that we do throughout the year. This was based on the risk of a student needing, or the likelihood of a student needing reading intervention. So the top tier was any student who was in the 40th percentile or above nationally. So we basically said that is proficient. And we were using the term proficient even though it wasn't maybe technically proficient, but it was students who probably don't need help. So that was that top tier. Below that, we had various levels of need of intervention. So we had, if you're 40th percentile above, you're at or above benchmark, great. Below that is on watch. Below 25th percentile is, okay, intervention. You go work with an interventionist because what you're getting in the regular classroom hasn't worked for you. And then below the 10th percentile is like urgent intervention. So those are the ones who like right away were prioritizing to get the intervention. Those are all great. But what you see on the right side is proficiency benchmarks. And they're different. They have different scales. They have different scores. So the reason why we're switching from risk level to proficiency is, first of all, because it more accurately measures the goal of every student being proficient. We weren't exactly measuring proficiency. We were measuring students who didn't need extra help, but there was a gap there because you could be sort of like above the 40th percentile, but maybe not at proficient. So we're being more accurate. We also did this to better align with the state forward exam because that's based on proficiency scales. So as we want STAR as we take it throughout the year to give us a really good sense of how our students are going to do on the state assessment. That's just very helpful to us. So the implication of this is that it might look like a decrease in proficiency when you compare last year to this year. Here's the visual illustration. This is, you don't really need to read the things, but look at the colors. So this is the fall, winter, and spring testing windows of STAR for reading. And these are two different ways to categorize the same results. The top band is what we've used in the past, which is risk levels. Students who are in that green band are considered above the 40th percentile and therefore in the past would have been called proficient. Students to the left side of that black bar that's in the middle are the various levels of urgency of needing intervention, and so we would have called them not proficient in some sort of way. So I know I said you don't have to read the numbers because I'll tell you one. If we look at the spring, so these go fall, winter, spring, so that third bar in the top set, that has basically 81% of the students are considered proficient based on that risk level. So if we take the exact same students, the exact same test, also fall, winter, and spring, but in the bottom band, this is based on the proficiency scale. So the blue at the top is like advanced. I don't even know what color that is. It's sort of a blue-green, maybe an aqua, a seafoam, I don't know. Teal, thank you, okay. So that's the meets. And then the yellow, and the yellow would be the basic, and then the other one is below basic. So these are the same kids and the same test, but we're just categorizing their results differently. And so when you look at the spring proficiency for the very bottom level, that's only a 65% would be considered proficient. So even though the students didn't go down, because this is the same test, 81% would look proficient using risk levels, 65% would look proficient using proficiency-based, which means if you were to look at last year's results when we talk about risk level proficiency, it's going to look like a lot were proficient, and then compare that to now, and it's going to look a lot lower just because there are fewer students in that category because we're kind of in the middle. We're drawing the middle someplace different. What questions do you have about that?
On the teal section.
Mm-hmm.
So does that coordinate with your on watch? You know, where you're watching them? No, that's
Mm-mm.
not the same coordination.
No.
Okay.
Good point. The on watch. Well, so here's the thing on this intervention. Interventionists will still use these risk levels to identify students who need intervention, but that's not going to be our proficiency measure. So in general, when we report proficiency, we're only going to report the students who are looked at as proficient. And the intervention is sort of a different thing, but it's going to be students who are below that midpoint target level.
Isn't this, though, a grade versus a cohort issue? I guess what I'm saying is that, so you're taking this point in time, and let's say it's this year's sixth grade, or last year's sixth graders.
Mm-hmm.
And so could you assess their fifth grade year with the new way you're assessing and seeing if there is actually a difference?
Yeah, we can retroactively go back and do this on some, and we might do that in order to establish.
In terms of mostly the kids that are to the left of the bar, right?
Yeah, so we can do that retroactively for the cohorts in the future to show like what the actual measure is. Or we could, except for some of the other challenges that are coming up.
Yeah, and so I guess my question is, how do you analyze this data effectively given kids continue to move through the system, right? And I mean, it's very complex, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's really hard for you to take a point in time in a certain child because they're always learning and growing and the concepts are changing, right?
It is. It's almost easier when you're dealing with an individual child. And because then you can actually measure discrete skills and we know the student, we know what's happening outside, and you can say, oh, you're growing this way. The reason we look at this stuff is more from that whole big system perspective, and it is very difficult because there are certain grades, like a couple of years ago, there was just this real anomaly test score, and we're like, oh my goodness, and we had to go back and look and see, was that a cohort issue? Like, so was it, anyway, trying to delve into this is really difficult because we can see, okay, something happened, but trying to figure out, okay, why exactly something happened is different. And like you said, looking at a difference here is really hard because if you have like, I'm going to make it up, there's, a fourth grade group at a school that like did really poorly on one of these tests. I mean, first we have to look at like, well, is that indicative of fourth graders in general, or just this fourth grade, or something that happened in the school, like there was a fire across the street, or something like that. So we have to look, but it's also, it's that grade level or that cohort level. We have to kind of look at both and figure out what makes the most sense to explain it.
Go ahead, Anna.
I have a question. So are the numbers we're looking at using the state STAR proficiency? Is the 23-24 data represented as the way we used to do it or the way we're going to start doing it?
The way we used to do it.
Okay, so what we've been looking at is how we used to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So follow-up question, I guess I'm just curious to know what the category basic means at the STAR, with the STAR testing, because what I'm trying to understand is, are we feeling that we need additional resources to get more kids into the proficiency with this different metric of how we are assessing performance? Because if we were initially using a different assessment tool, but now we're changing that assessment tool, it like you said, it appears as though we have less kids who are proficient, and that the data doesn't lie, right? It's the data is the data. So I guess I'm just trying to understand if this, what this might mean for how we get more kids onto the other side of the bar, so to speak.
That is a really good question. And here's a weird thing. One of the other data challenges will actually move all this stuff in the other direction. And so they're kind of going to offset themselves. So let me come back to that at the end if you still wonder.
I guess the bottom line is I want to make sure that our students are getting all of the assistance that they need to make them proficient. And so if we're using a different assessment tool, I just want to make sure that that continues to allow us to identify our gaps and where we need to put our resources and what resources we need and how we measure that. I guess I'm going to leave that up to you folks, but it just makes me wonder, you know, why are we seeing that big difference in what we are defining as proficient, I guess.
I think I might be able to help a little bit with that. I think exactly what you're talking about, Anna, related to resources, that's why we're in the SAIL process, and the strategies that we're implementing through the SAIL process is meant to target that exact piece that you pointed out. Because through analyzing the student work protocol, that's when educators get to sit collaboratively as a team and say, okay, who met the standard and who did not, and what are we going to do about it? So that entire process and what we're measuring is meant to target exactly what you pointed out.
Go ahead, Caleb.
Really quickly, and this is to prevent me from asking these questions in coming weeks. So we're talking about the same data, right? So it's the same information interpreted differently. I guess, John, could you go back to the last slide and just one more time explain, or how, not that, was it that slide, or I don't know what slide it was, or maybe it was that slide. Anyway, your explanation of how the data is being interpreted now versus before, just really quickly reiterate that again so I'm sure that I completely understand it. That's it. Yeah, that slide.
So when students take the STAR test, they get a scale score, which is its own thing. So it's a digit number. The way that we used to do it is we used what's called the intervention. It was looking at risk levels for intervention. And so basically the way we put a kid in a category, sounds horrible, but that's kind of what it was. Yeah, it's a setting. So we get to choose. So all the scale scores are in there, and we just basically can say, oh, we want to display this as intervention level or intervention risk level, or we want to do it as like district state standard. And so it'll toggle between the two. And the way that we used to do it was based on the intervention risk level. And that intervention risk level looked at the student scale score, and it looked at the whole country, and it said, oh, what percentile is this kid in according to the whole country? And so if that kid was above the 40th percentile, they're at no risk for needing intervention. And so we counted that as proficient. A lot of school districts did this. It was kind of a common thing. So that's the way that we used to do it. So every kid was based in a category of how much intervention they needed based on national norms and their percentile score. So that was what we used. And so basically it said if you're above the 40th percentile, you're good. And we called it proficient or benchmark. We met benchmark. That part makes sense? Okay. So the actual STAR proficiency benchmark measure does it differently. It doesn't do it based on percentile. It does it purely on scaled score. And it says, if you are in this range, this range, this range, or this range, you are either below basic, proficient, or advanced. So it doesn't look at the norms. It just looks at where you're at. Sorry, I didn't explain that better the first time.
I just wanted to make sure I was completely clear, and I think the way that you explained it the second time just kind of reinforced it, so I get it totally. So thank you.
I think that was the hardest challenge, so it'll get easier from here.
So is the board proficient, advanced, or what on understanding that?
No need for intervention.
Okay, our second challenge, and this is actually reflected in the data that is reported out now. Last year, we made this change already, is based on research. We have decided to remove running records from as a supplementary data point to indicate proficiency. So we made this choice as we continue to align our practices with the latest educational research. We made the decision to remove them as a data point that indicates proficiency in reading. It's based on careful consideration of how we can best assess and support student learning in alignment with the science of reading. So the decision really emphasizes the importance of phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Running records primarily measure only fluency and comprehension, and they don't adequately assess the critical foundational skills that are essential for developing strong readers. By moving away from running records, we can better align our assessment practices with the research and ensure that we're evaluating the right skills at the right time. As a result of this change, you may notice what appears to be a decrease in reading proficiency from the 2022-23 school year to the 23-24 school year for grades K-6. This is not necessarily an indication that student performance has declined. Rather, it is that our assessment practices are now better aligned with what the research tells us about effective reading instruction. So here is a picture of what that may appear like in the charts that you've received. Again, it is not necessarily an indication that students' performance has declined, but that our practices are better aligned with what research tells us. When we consider that reducing the number of data points, especially by removing running records, we are now narrowing our focus on the most critical indicators for student proficiency. This sharpens our understanding of where students truly stand in their reading development. Additionally, this change eliminates one more test that could previously have been counted toward proficiency. And while it may initially seem like a disadvantage, it actually ensures that we're concentrating on the most relevant and impactful assessments, which lead us to a clearer picture of student achievement. That was easier? Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by running records.
I'm sorry. So running records were assessments that teachers did in classrooms where students read. So that was where we got, like, you might have heard of Rigby or F&P scores. Those were those leveled readers that they were doing in the classroom with the teacher, and it was just a one-on-one read to the teacher. We're not saying that those assessments are not useful, but the purpose of measuring proficiency with them is not aligned with the science of reading.
It was easier.
It was.
Wait till my next one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Next one is really easy. So the challenge number 3 is that DPI recalibrated their tests, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. How they redid the questions, they changed the forward exam, they made some great changes to it. They got rid of a thing called text-dependent analysis, and they replaced it, for example, with an actual written portion where a student has to write like 2 paragraphs of a certain type, like either a persuasive or a narrative statement, and it's actual writing that they do. So it's not just like multiple choice tests or anything. I mean, it hasn't been only that for a while, but there's like some real actual performance things into it. Well, they changed the test to reflect the new state standards, and therefore they had to recalibrate the scores. And I actually talked to somebody from DPI to make sure that I had the understanding of this correct. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see the 2023 forward exam cut scores. You'll notice they're 3-digit numbers. On the right side, you'll see the forward exam benchmark cut scores. You'll notice they're 4-digit numbers. They said, yeah, we did that intentionally to make it clear to people that we changed the scale, so they're not going to get confused and accidentally compare like a scale score from 23 and a scale score from 24, because it's pretty obvious it doesn't make a lot of sense when you've got an extra digit there. So essentially what this means is they say, they actually say it's recommended that you consider spring of 2024 the first year of a new trend when you're comparing student performance in the future. So essentially they're saying you can't compare the old data to the new ones using forward. So use the spring forward scores as your first year and just measure your growth from there going forward. That's for ELA and math. Science and social studies are still on the old scales with 3 digits. So Sorry, that was unnecessary information. We're only talking about ELA here, but what questions do you have about that?
This isn't necessarily about that, but it sort of is. I'm curious about, like, we're talking about ELA, STAR, and now Forward. When we look at the state report card, how do they measure that versus what we're looking at here? Or is that the same? I'm trying to get an idea, like, to understand that a little bit better.
I think I can answer that. Do you remember a few slides ago when we talked about we changed how we're measuring things to better reflect? It was my first challenge, to better reflect, like, so STAR is a better predictor of the Forward exam test. So STAR, that's one of their things, is they do a bunch of statistical work that I don't understand to say there's a high correlation between what you get on a STAR and what you get on the Forward test. So the goal is for both of these to measure basically the same thing. And so if you have a student who's consistently proficient, or I'm going to stop using that word because they changed the word, consistently scoring whatever, a 960 on STAR, that they're going to get about that on the Forward test, because it's helpful for us to see how are we on track for this. So when they are scoring, when Forward is, so we use STAR during the year to gauge our progress, and STAR is also used to look at individual, like, instructional planning for students. And we're using it at a very high level, but there's a very teacher-centric level too, where they can look at it and say, oh, here are the individual areas that a certain student needs it in. But for our purposes, we're looking at Forward and STAR, and we're trying to make them be about as close as possible. STAR has not yet realigned their cut scores with DPI's cut scores, but soon they will be aligned, which will help us, like, once they recalibrate to match the states, because we talked with a STAR person today, that's what they're working on, then we'll be looking at basically the same thing.
So then basically it's Forward that goes into the state report card.
Yes. Sorry, if that was your question,
I was trying to, like,
that way.
tie them all together, and I wasn't quite getting the meshing correctly.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, Forward scores are what goes on the state report card. STAR and the ACT, and the 10th grade social studies test. I guess that is the Forward test. So anyway, yeah, Forward test is what goes on the state report card, and with other things. But then STAR is just what we use internally. Like, every school district in the state has to take the Forward. They don't all have to take STAR. That's something that we purchase to help us.
So then what you're saying is that the powers that be are now trying to align those two things so that when we're looking at STAR, then theoretically we should be understanding where we're going to be on the state report card ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, here's the fourth challenge, and this really is minor, but it's another way that DPI is making it very clear that we shouldn't compare scores this year on Forward to years past. So what they've done is they've changed the performance category names. So you can see on the left side are the old performance category names, and on the right side are the new performance category names. So, like, before we were talking about below basic, now we'll be calling it developing. Before we called it basic, we'll now call it approaching. Before we called it proficient, it's now meeting, and advanced has not changed the terminology. What questions do you have?
So with these changes to the things, and this maybe is not something that you're thinking of immediately or anything else, but will we, looking forward, make any changes on what our report cards look like with the language on those? Does that make sense at all?
It makes sense. I hadn't actually thought of that, so I don't know yet. We try to use pretty asset-based language already in our proficiency standards, and so I don't know that we would need to, but thank you for the thought. Okay, with that, I would actually like to show you now our Forward exam results for this spring. So this is our all students English language arts. And what you might recall from two things I want to point out. One is you'll notice the new terminology at the bottom. This is advanced, meeting, approaching, and developing. So those are the new asset-based terms. You may also notice that before, you probably don't remember this, but we had 55% in the top 2 categories. And now under the recalibration, we have 64% in the top 2 categories, which looks like a markable improvement. So this is why when you, Anna, were asking about, oh my goodness, if it goes way down, like what do we need to do? Well, this pushes it up. So they kind of wash each other out. And I think the big point here is to say we can't really compare forward from one year to the next. We can still retroactively go back and say, let's calculate STAR scores based on proficiency rather than risk. I don't know how helpful that is, except to compare for a couple years back, but eventually that won't serve us very well, except to analyze those cohort trends. But in this case, this is actually kind of really good news because this is our ELA score, and then I'll share reading as well, which is also quite good. This is up to 64% in the top 2 categories. I mean, obviously, we still have 30% that are in the bottom 2, and we would like that to be much less, but it's better than almost a half and half split. And then in writing, also we have about 61.5% in the top 2 categories, so that's also good. And it feels weird to be like, oh yeah, we suddenly just jumped, but the point that DPI is doing is they're saying we changed the standards, so we changed the test to match the standards. And now we're changing the scoring to make sure that we're accurately representing the proficiency of the students on the assessment and categorizing them correctly. So this is the most accurate representation of what our students can do given the current academic standards of Wisconsin. So there, what questions do you have about any of that?
Anyone? Any additional questions? Go ahead, Anna.
I have a question about some of the data, and I didn't put it on the sheet, but just some things that I noticed. And so I guess I don't know if you want those now or if you want me to follow up with those. But I noticed that we often had a lot of high trends in the proficiency. We saw big improvements in the proficiency, but we didn't see that same level of improvement in the growth. And I'm just curious how that works as far as, once they meet the standard, then maybe they're not seeing that growth. Does that indicate a need for more advanced curriculum, for example, if we're not getting seeing that full growth, but yet we're seeing kids that are proficient? Like there was an example where it was like 80% proficiency, like 86% proficiency, but 37% didn't meet 1 year's growth. So that to me seemed like, is that a gap that we're looking at related to the growth of our students separately from being proficient at meeting the standard? So I just picked up on that in a couple of the grades, and I'm just curious if anyone else picked up on that or what that might mean for the growth piece.
That is typically why we've wanted to have a growth goal, is because we know that just because kids are proficient, we also want them to keep learning. And so for students who come in knowing the goal already, it's helpful to have a growth goal to make sure that we're continuously challenging them. As we work in our PLCs, one of the questions that we ask is who benefited and who didn't. Like, what do we want students to know? How do we know if they know it already? How will we know when they know it? And then, what are we going to do? And who benefited and who did not? So those are the kind of questions that as a PLC we can look at and be like, oh, we did a pre-assessment. All these kids already knew it. Okay, now what are we going to do to make sure they're continuing to grow? Because we know that happens, just like you saw. The growth goals are also kind of different. they're based on SGP, and we had different growth goals depending on students who were proficient already. It was you need to have a 35 SGP, and if you weren't proficient, we wanted you to get a 50 SGP to grow more to be able to catch up, which is beneficial. For simplicity's sake, we're focusing down with our data to just proficiency, knowing that growth is a necessary component of that, but not articulating it outright because the time it took to do that and compile it was really onerous. But we know that on the individual basis, it's still really important because from a classroom teacher looking at, I need to get this kid to proficient, they're automatically going to take care of the growth part to make sure that they're there. So it is a concern, and it's something that we keep looking at because it's important for that to happen.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys. Very informative.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your work on this. Dr. Bergstrom, anything you want to add?
I apologize for the confusion as far as all of the challenges, but honestly, we can't control the state. I apologize for the confusion related to cohort data and how difficult it will be to take a look past and see where we're going. However, I think it's also really important that we have raised the bar for ourselves in a big piece of this, because we really want to ensure that we have a very accurate picture of where our kids are. And so we've created some complications for ourselves, but for really good purposes. And I'm really glad that we made the decision, and I think ultimately it's going to service our kids.
Thank you for all the time and effort you're putting into going to SAIL and your fidelity to data. I think it's really going to serve us well, and I think you've already felt the importance of it and how it's focusing your work back to that wonderful quote that Darcy had in terms of focus. Focus is really important, and our students and our families are going to benefit. So thank you guys. I know it's been a ton of time and a lot of work, and you're doing this without a dedicated data person, which other districts do have. So thank you for all that you're doing. So, all right, moving on to superintendent report.
Okay, so our very first, here we go. Our very first picture is our new educators. You can see we have approximately 40 educators who are new to the district, and you may have seen them out and about in the community as part of their scavenger hunt that they do on the very first day of their new educator orientation, because we believe it's so important for the people who work in our schools to know our community. And for many of them, they're coming here for the first time and they have no idea what the Tin Man is, or they don't know what businesses are popular in Fitchburg as examples. So we send them on a really fun scavenger hunt. And when Mr. Tanner and I do our year 2 interviews, it's often brought up as a way that they formed connections with one another, because they're driving around in their car, in a car together, having a really good time, and many of them stay in contact with their original scavenger hunt group. And that's, I think, really, really delightful. Also, we want you to watch our social media page for our new staff features, because we are trying to get our new staff out there to our community. It's a fun way to get an introduction to this really amazing group of people who are joining their team, and we really want to help them feel welcome by writing a note of well wishes as they begin this OSD journey. So there are the first few you see here, and keep watching our Facebook page throughout the next few weeks for more new staff features. We also want to welcome another member of our team, and that is our new SRO, Officer Krantz. Today was his very first day, and he stopped by for a picture, and we appreciate that. And he has been touring all of the buildings and getting himself up to speed, and we're really happy to have him. We will all miss who is now Sergeant Shuey. We'll definitely miss Sergeant Shuey, but everybody's excited to work with Officer Krantz because he's so excited to work with kids. Jumpstart orientation. This is just a fun time. RCI, OMS, and High School Jumpstart all takes place the same day at the same time. That way we can, make it more efficient transportation decisions, getting them all there and back on the same day. But this is just a fun and energized morning. You get to stop by and see all of the different kids at the schools. And in each situation, it's approximately 2/3 to 3/4 of the students come to Jumpstart. And you see the pink t-shirts there. Those are our staff and our Pride Crew members at the high school. So that you can't have the Pride Crew t-shirts be orange and black, or you couldn't pick the kids who are Pride Crew members out from the freshman students who walk in. It has to be something different that stands out. And another really fun feature of that is this is also during new educator orientation. So many of our new educators get to run downstairs into the gym when the freshmen come in for the first time and be a part of the tunnel of applause, which for some freshmen, they look like they're having an awesome time. And some freshmen, I think, try to skirt the tunnel of applause. And I completely understand why. But they get to spend time with their friends, get tips about starting the school year off right, and really just feel comfortable and welcome in their new environment. And then we had Fitchburg's National Night Out. This was quite a lovely, very busy event. You see a lot of these pictures here. And you see that Forest Edge administrative intern Michelle Minter joined us, and Gina Jonan joined us, along with Hans, who was here earlier talking about the German exchange. He was our wonderful student volunteer who made bracelets for kids all night long. It was really a great event. You got to interact with a lot of different people, and now who knows how many kids are walking around wearing our orange and black bracelets. And reminder that we were at Brooklyn in the Village of Oregon earlier too. Oh, and another alumni spotlight. So we were at the Fitchburg Night Out, and who comes over to us but Brock Buskager from the class of 2024. He was there doing his work as a member of the fire department. So how cool is that, right? He's a fire and EMT professional. And another alumni spotlight, we have OSD graduate Blake Anderson here, who's sporting his white coat as he enters his first year as a dental student at the University of Iowa. So Blake graduated from Luther College in Iowa this past spring. So congratulations, Blake. We're really proud of you. And another alumni spotlight. These are so fun. This is OSD 2016 graduate James or Jimmy Lutz. He's living his dream as a professional archerist. In addition to being a pro staff shooter from Matthews Archery, James is ranked #1 in the U.S. for the past 4 years, as well as the top 3 in the world. James travels throughout the world competing and has won 25 professional gold medals. His favorite places he's been to travel have been Korea, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Colombia. His motto is, "Don't miss." You can follow James on Facebook at James Lutz Archery. So if anyone has an alumni update to feature, send an email with the subject line alumni feature to socialmedia@oregonsd.org. And then, look at that, Hans is here again. You see, Hans and Ellie were selected to do the podcast on the transition to 9th grade. So they were there to give advice to the students who are starting their 9th grade year. And I really hope that, I know our students are probably not listening to the podcast, but perhaps their parents are, and maybe they can encourage them to listen to it together and have a good conversation about transitioning to high school.
You know, it's really interesting when we talk about, our school district has more transitions than a lot of other school districts. And I remember, sometimes it takes an outside look. And I remember when Erica first got hired at OSD, and one of her things was transitions and how we really need to ease transitions for kids. Do you remember this? From building to building. And so I look at that, and now I think, how many years have you been here? 5, right? And now look at what we're doing with Jumpstart and how many, 3/4 of the class is attending Jumpstart when they go to a new school. So, I mean, sometimes it's somebody's emphasis or, you know, communication about it. And so that's what I think is really cool about our district, is that we really listen and learn and implement, and our kids really benefit. But, you know, Jumpstart's a really important thing because we talk about connection. You know, one of the most important things is the kids having a connection with somebody or something. And when you can start that connection before they start school, it's really, really important. So super cool. All right. Next on our agenda is closing. So future agenda, our next meeting is September 9th. So we will be in September already and well into the school year, 1 week. So, all right, checkout. Go around the room. Anything from you, Troy? Leslie?
Yes, so I just want to give props to Jumpstart as well. My new 7th grader just went to OMS Jumpstart, met his new principal. So Heidi Ms. Walters seems amazing because I got to meet her as well. And he came home, said he had a good time, which is really good to hear because he doesn't always have a good time with school. So that was really good that he was able to get more comfortable. So I really appreciate all that work.
Great, thank you. Caleb, anything? Anna? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I'll second. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned at 8:09.